and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 522, and today's date is November 19th, 2014, and the title of this episode is, "The U.S. now calling Libyan rebels, the Islamic State, to invade Libya again." Now, we all understand what is going on in the Middle East. I mean, the entire Middle East is completely falling apart, and what's happening is the U.S. government, the central bankers, they are losing control in this area. We understand that Yemen has been taken over by the people. We understand that Libya has thrown out the puppet regime, and they have taken over the entire country. They put in their own parliament. They have their own government. We see Lebanon right now in a battle where the puppet government is fighting against the people of Lebanon. And the same thing's happening in Iraq, but of course they have the Islamic State in there to cause chaos and to keep everyone's eyes off of what is really going on there. Now, we understand that to get into one of these or all of these countries once again, what do they have to do? They have to show that the Islamic State is in each of these countries because, again, the United States government is pushing a bill where they can go anywhere terrorist groups are, and that's including the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, Khorasan, or any other terrorist group that is not listed. And we can see right now they are definitely pushing the agenda here. And we've seen this before. There was a bill where the United States government could use drones against Al-Qaeda. So any one of those people in the Middle East who did not like the puppet government, who was fighting against the puppet government, they were called Al-Qaeda, and the United States government central bankers used drone attacks to keep these people back. And of course, these were just everyday people in these countries who wanted the central bankers out, wanted the U.S. government out of their country, and they were called Al-Qaeda. They also used Al-Qaeda to fight Assad. So there's two different ways they use it. Now what they're doing, since Al-Qaeda is out and the Islamic State is in, they are calling everybody the Islamic State. And you can see how this is starting to morph now into pretty much no more Al-Qaeda. There's going to be no more Khorasan. It's going to be all Islamic State as we go forward. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand the economy here in the United States is completely falling apart. But, of course, the government, the Fed, they're all out there manipulating all the different statistical numbers like unemployment, GDP, inflation. Of course, they want you to continually stare at the stock market, watch it go up, up, up as gold is being suppressed, because if gold started to rise, people would scratch their heads and say, what's going on here? So they need to keep that suppressed, and they need to keep everyone's eyes on the stock market, because this, according to them, and according to many people, when they look at the stock market, they do believe that this is an indicator of how the economy is doing, which is completely fake, phony, and false. It is not the indicator. It is the last signal when the economy falls and collapses. We're looking at the real economic indicators, and we can see by many different statistical numbers and many things that we see out there that, yes, the economy is falling apart. I mean, we take a look at those youths who are going to college. Most of them cannot find a job. About 80% of them are having a difficult time finding a high-paying job in their major. These youths are living with their parents. They're trying and struggling to pay for their student loans, and this is why the government is coming out with all these different programs to help with their student loans. And we can see right now that all of this is leading up to this economic collapse, because the youth of America is the next generation. Now, there was an analysis done by the U.S. Census data by the Georgetown University Center on Education, where they're saying that millennials are the most underemployed generation. And basically, the underemployment can mean they are underpaid for their education and training, not using their education and training in their current job, and or working part-time but are still seeking full-time work. And we see a lot of college graduates, we see a lot of them out there trying to find work in their majors, and they cannot. As a result, millennials have a harder time achieving financial independence than older generations. Nearly 1/4 said they have had to move back home at some point in their lives after entering the workforce due to financial hardship. Approximately about 40% of unemployed workers are millennials, according to an analysis of the U.S. Census by Georgetown University Center of Education, which is greater than both Generation X and the baby boomers. So we can see this is really taking its toll. And yesterday when I reported on those people who are having a very hard time finding work, and it's a very small percentage of those people that actually do find work, we can see that this whole thing is starting to fall apart, and they're continually manipulating the numbers, trying to cover everything up, but eventually what's going to happen, it's going to completely fall apart. Now, we understand that real estate is imploding. Now, of course, they don't want anyone to know this. They want to convince you that real estate is doing fine, everything's perfect. But again, we have to go back to last year, around August of 2013, when they started laying off thousands upon thousands of people in their mortgage departments. Just go on Google, take a little search, and you'll see that Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, they all laid off thousands upon thousands of people from then leading up to right now, because they knew the American people were not going to buy these homes. Where were the home purchases coming from? Well, hedge funds, investment companies using free money from the Fed, purchasing these homes in cash. We also understand there's foreign investors coming in and purchasing these homes for cash. And right now, we are seeing that housing starts, they expected it to be a positive 0.8%, but it's a negative 2.8%. The only region with any increase in starts was the South. The level of actual housing completions for single-family houses dropped by 7.4%. So basically, they're starting the housing and they're really not completing them because people are backing out. They're either getting laid off or the interest rates are going up, and it's pretty much getting them out of the market where they can get a mortgage, and this happens to quite a few people. I looked around the country once again. Yes, we are having the same problem as we go further and further into 2014. People have their houses on the market longer and longer. The prices are coming down. They're reducing their prices 2 to 3 times now, and it is not stopping. The traffic is drying up. Now, we all understand, because of all of this that's happening right now, that a lot of people who've lost their job, who can't find work, are depending on the government, like food stamps and other things like that. And here are some facts that prove that the dependence on the government is out of control in America, and this is coming out of the end of the American dream. And we can see that about 70% of all government spending now goes toward dependence creating programs. From 2009 through 2013, the U.S. government spent a whopping $3.7 trillion on welfare programs. The percentage of U.S. population that gets money from the federal government grew by an astounding 62% between 1988 and 2011. 86 million full-time private sector workers in the United States paying taxes to support the government, and nearly 148 million Americans that are receiving benefits from the government each month. The number of Americans on food stamps has grown from 17 million in the year 2000 to more than 46 million today. Back in 1970, about 1 out of every 50 Americans was on food stamps. Today, about 1 out of every 6.5 Americans is now on food stamps. Today, the number of Americans on food stamps exceeds the entire population of the nation of Spain. The most Americans are not earning enough to support themselves and their families without government help anymore. The following are some statistics about wages in the U.S. from Social Security Administration report that was recently released. 39% of American workers made less than $20,000 a year. 52% of American workers made less than $30,000. 63% made less than $40,000 a year, and 72% American workers made less than $50,000 a year. And here in the United States, we can see that wages are not going up. They are actually decreasing at this point in time, and we see inflation pushing the prices of everything continually going up. And of course, this is really the devaluation of the dollar. Now, we understand that the Middle Eastern countries, a lot of the private Western central bank countries, they are all using the dollar to pay for oil. And we understand the U.S. government central bankers use military force to make sure that everyone is using the dollar and to make sure that everyone is keeping reserves in their central banks to pay for this oil. But there is a change coming, and this is coming from an HSBC official saying that there is an increased demand for crude in Asian countries such as China, and it looks like they might be selling their crude using the renminbi. The Middle East has been slow in adopting the renminbi. Well, that's because In the Middle East, we have the United States government central bankers forcing them to use the dollar and only the dollar, but this is starting to change. And again, like I said, once these people rise up and they take back their countries, they will use other currencies besides the dollar. They will use the renminbi, they will use the yuan, the ruble, the gold. Whoever has a different currency, they will sell this oil to them. And this is going to be a huge problem for the central bankers. And this is what they're trying to stop right now. They do not want this to go forward. They're trying to stop it. But there is a change coming. And we're starting to see that, yes, there's a huge demand. And this will change eventually. Now, as you know, I talk about Obamacare quite a bit. Pretty much anyone that has been listening to me knows how I feel. If you don't, you can go back to my previous reports and take a look at that and understand how I feel about it. And what we're seeing right now is that the premiums are starting to rise. Of course, it's called the Affordable Care Act, and they always put these titles on these bills that become laws to make everyone believe that it is affordable when, as we know, it isn't. And we know this was not designed to help the people. We have Gruber out there now with many, many different videos letting everyone know that this whole thing was a complete scam. It was a setup. It was to make the insurance companies rich. It was to bring in tax revenue into the government, and the benefits for the people non-existent. Because if there were truly benefits for the people, guess what? Congress, the president, they would have all sat down in front of the TV. They would have shown the American people how great it is, and they would have applied for it. But guess what? They exempted themselves because they didn't want this. This had no help to them whatsoever in the health market. They kept their plans that the government supplies for them because they're much, much better. Believe me, they know exactly what's going on here. And what we're seeing right now is people out there saying, yes, the premiums are rising. There is a article from Zero Hedge out there saying my wife and I own a small business, and we had previously in 2013 been buying health insurance on our own for ourselves and our 2 kids. The cost was about $600 per month with a $5,200 deductible, $6,800 total out-of-pocket exposure for the family of 4. After spending months trying to register for the Affordable Care Act in late 2013 and early 2014, my kids got put on the state insurance at no cost, and my wife and I bagged an Affordable Care Act policy at a subsidized cost of $281 per month with a total out-of-pocket of about $6,500 just for the 2 of us. The cost goes from $281 to $555, a monthly increase of $274, an increase of 97%. Now again, they have the family deductible of $6,500, which means they're going to have to pay out of pocket plus the $555 every single month before the insurance even kicks in. How is this possibly a benefit to anybody? This is just costing them an arm and a leg and is not helping anybody whatsoever. He went on to say, we are now paying the same amount for the 2 of us that we paid for all 4 of us 1 year ago. So this is getting more and more expensive as time goes on. Now, there are rumors out there saying that Obama is going to be getting ready to pass his executive authority to provide work permits for up to 5 million people who are in the U.S. illegally. Now, we understand this is all part of the agenda to bring the illegals over the border, to get them on Obamacare, to subsidize them, to give them work permits. And basically what's happening is, and I mentioned this yesterday, there are many different polls out there showing that the American people don't want this whatsoever. An NBC News Wall Street Journal poll finds nearly half of Americans disapprove of this plan. Only 38% support it. Now, again, we have to remember, he waited for after the elections, and even though the Americans are saying, the people of America are saying, don't do this, we do not approve, he's doing it anyhow because it's for the central bankers, it's for the corporations, it's for his agenda, which they need to bring all these people in. And I mentioned this many, many times before, and we can see that, again, the government today does nothing for the people. They don't listen to the people. They are listening to the central bankers. They are listening to the corporations and not the people at all. Now, yesterday I mentioned a bill called the USA Freedom Act, and as we know, it is never whatever it says is not really what it means. It's always the opposite. Again, whatever government officials say, it is always the opposite. But it looks like this bill was trying to be pushed through to stop the NSA from spying on the American people, and a lot of tech giants were behind this. But it looks like the U.S. Senate failed to get the 60 votes needed to break the filibuster. And again, we have to remember Harry Reid had certain writers on this bill, one of them being SOPA, but it looks like it failed in the Senate because they want the NSA spying on everyone, violating your Fourth Amendment, and it looks like it's going to continue. It is not going to stop whatsoever. Now, yesterday we talked about Ferguson, and we understand that the governor has declared state of emergency. We understand DHS has about 100 vehicles about 25 miles away from Ferguson, and the person who took these pictures and reported this, Navy veteran Mark Paffrath, who took the pictures in Drury Plaza Hotel in Missouri, he has now been terminated from his job, threatened with imprisonment, and branded a terrorist for leaking this information. And of course, DHS is out there saying, oh, no, this is for training. It's just by coincidence we're in the same area. And of course, as we know, whenever we see this happen, and DHS or FEMA or any of these organizations or agencies are in these areas, we know for a fact that they're there for a specific reason. And we can see they are there for when this goes hot. Now, we also understand the National Guard is there. They also have the Enhanced Response Force package assets, and they were spotted in Chesterfield, West County. And what is this? Well, these are vehicles that are used for special purposes like chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and high-yield explosive events, and they are being brought into the Ferguson area. And we have to remember, the FBI is out there, and they're letting everyone know that this could really get out of control. It could spread across the country, and as we can see, this is definitely planned. They're going to have agent provocateurs in all of these different areas, and they're going to try to gin rioting up as hard as they possibly can, because as we know, they want to declare martial law here, suspend the Constitution, and lock down on the people to let everyone know, if you try rising up or trying anything like this, the government will beat you down and control you. And this is what they want to show everyone right now. Now, here in the United States, we understand the government is doing everything they possibly can to get rid of the weapons from the people. They're trying to get rid of the Second Amendment. They're trying to get rid of a lot of our rights. But we see in Russia right now, the Russian government is easing restrictions, allowing citizens to carry their licensed weapons for the purpose of self-defense. Now, here in the United States, we see they're trying to get rid of the Second Amendment, and Russia, they're saying, yes, we're going to pass laws to allow people to carry their weapons for self-defense. And of course, as we know why this is happening, because the central bankers, the U.S. government, they want control of the people. This is why DHS has been training the local law enforcement to be militarized. A lot of these police outfits are going over to Israel to get training over there. Then they're being brought over here. This is why we see them and the way they react to people in the streets. I mean, look what happened in Ferguson. The militarized police were out there. They were pointing weapons at people who had their hands up. They didn't even have weapons, and that was a little excessive, but they're trying to show you this is what's going to happen if you decide to go against us. Now, we understand in Afghanistan, the U.S. government had the president sign the bilateral security agreement, which will allow troops to stay in Afghanistan and bring more troops in there. Now, the German cabinet has approved a plan to deploy up to about 850 soldiers to Afghanistan as part of a post-2014 training and advisory mission led by NATO. The new NATO mission is expected to consist of about 12,000 soldiers, including 8,000 U.S. troops and 4,000 from other NATO member states. Now, every time we see some type of training or something like this going on, we realize that they kind of leave the soldiers and the military assets in these areas. And we're going to have to check up on this and watch us to see if these things are being pretty much left there and soldiers are being brought into Afghanistan and they're not leaving later on. Now, in China, they are establishing naval bases all around Africa and in many different areas. The Walvis Bay area in Namibia, they're going to be setting up a naval base, and it will be one of 18 naval bases that will be established in various regions: Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, in northern Indian Ocean, Djibouti, and this is where the United States signed a long-term lease there to have a military base. There's going to be a naval base in Yemen, Oman, Kenya, Tanzania, and Mozambique in the western Indian Ocean, and this is on the eastern side of Africa. And as we know, we're going to see discoveries in this area, and we're going to see the United States central bankers move into the eastern part of Africa. But basically what China is doing is they're going around the entire continent of Africa, setting up naval bases, and they're saying these are strategic lines, will further enhance China's effectiveness in taking responsibility for maintaining the safety of international maritime routes, thereby maintaining regional and world stability. So they are preparing, they are moving military assets to all different regions, because they realize what is going on here. They realize the United States government, the central bankers, they are preparing for war, and China and Russia, they are making preparations because they know exactly what is coming. Now, Russia is out there, and they are planning to develop relations with African countries and will give all assistance they need. Now, they're trying to make deals with Tanzania and Mozambique. Hopefully I'm pronouncing these correctly, maybe not. But we can see right now, in both of these countries, which are on the eastern side of Africa, we realize there is huge gas discoveries that were just discovered in this area. Russia is also trying to work out some ties and have economic relations with Djibouti, and we're also seeing that they are doing this, and the United States government central bankers, they are going to be maneuvering into each one of these countries. We're going to have to watch this very carefully because we see them in West Africa. They're moving over to Congo, trying to get into Nigeria, trying to get into Uganda, and they're moving over to the east side of Africa. Wherever Russia and China are, this is where they're trying to maneuver into. Now, we understand that Russia right now is trying to create a South Stream gas pipeline that's going to go around the Ukraine because, of course, they don't trust Ukraine right now. They realize what's happening. They see war coming, so they want to have a separate gas pipeline to supply Europe. And they've made deals with many different countries there, one of them being Hungary. And, of course, the United States government central bankers do not like this. They're putting a lot of pressure on Hungary right now. And Putin is out there saying, listen, do not interfere with Russia's affairs. We are making deals with these countries, and the United States government central bankers should not be getting involved in what is going on here. And he's basically telling them to back off. Now, in Ukraine, we understand they've been purchasing coal from South Africa, and that deal has fell through. They haven't made payments. There was a lot of fraud going on with this, and it seems like the coal in Ukraine, 2 out of 10 coal-fired power plants in Ukraine, only have enough stock for a few days, as the key coal mines supplying the plants are located in the Donetsk and Lugansk areas. And of course, they're not supplying them with coal right now. And of course, the United States is coming in and saying, listen, we will supply it for you, but this hasn't happened just yet. And it seems like they have a short period of time, and this coal is going to pretty much run out. Now, we understand that the U.S. and NATO, they're continually out there telling us that Russia is building up forces along the border, that Russia is already inside of Ukraine. And basically there's a guy, Rick Rozoff, the manager of Stop NATO Network. He has said that the U.S. and the NATO are lying about the deployment of Russian military forces inside and near Ukraine in order to provide a smokescreen for their own buildup of forces targeted against Russia. He pointed to examples of U.S. and NATO buildup by referring to the rotation of F-16s capable of carrying nuclear payload, accompanied by U.S. paratroopers, the deployment of U.S. Special Forces, Operation Atlantic Resolve, which is aimed specifically at Russia, the development of 25,000 troops, NATO response force aimed at Russia, and coming out of the NATO Wales Summit, a high readiness task force to be deployed in Eastern Europe aimed at Russia. And here is some other proof that Russia is not building up forces. Russia has just granted the United States to go ahead and use the Open Sky Treaty to fly over Russia. During the past several days, a U.S. observation plane has been flying over Russian skies, taking photos of military installations and equipment, all with permission of Russians. Once they enter Russia, the Open Skies personnel have 96 hours to complete their observation flights and another 24 hours to depart. They are allowed to fly over any part of Russia. So we're seeing right now, they pretty much have the authority to fly over, take their pictures to prove that they are not building up forces in this area, and this is going on right now. Now, as we know, Russia was out there saying, listen, we need to have peace talks between Kiev and the southeastern people. They need to come together and they talk. Well, guess what's happening? Well, Ukraine right now is rejecting Moscow's call for direct talks with the rebels. They're saying we do not want to do this. Russia urged Ukraine's leaders on Wednesday to talk directly to them. And basically Kiev rejected the call and told Moscow to stop playing games aimed at legitimizing terrorists. So what are we seeing right now? We are definitely seeing the buildup for war. They're stopping talks. They're not talking whatsoever. They cut the southeastern section off, and it seems like they are getting ready to push their agenda forward. Even Russia is out there, and they're warning that Ukraine's potential plan is to attack the east right now. Ukraine's decision to stop budget payments to its eastern regions may be a precursor to a military attack on the areas, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says. By freezing the budget, the Ukrainian government may be preparing for the ground for another invasion in order to solve the issue by force. And we can see this is exactly what they're trying to do. They are pushing hard to do this. Now, there's an Obama aide out there, and he's saying, you know something? Maybe President Obama should be sending Ukraine lethal defensive military assistance to get Russia to think twice about its destabilizing behavior. And we can see right now they are getting prepared, most likely to send military assets in the open. We know they've been doing this covertly. They've been building up the military in Ukraine. They've been training the troops there because they're getting ready for a large offensive in this area. Now, out in the Middle East, we see that things are breaking down, and basically the coalition forces are fighting the Islamic State. Of course, they created them, and they're pretending to fight them. But France will be sending in about 6 Mirage fighter jets to Jordan to strike the Islamic State fighters in Iraq. And Saudi Arabia right now, they have expanded a buffer zone along the kingdom's border with Iraq. Officials said the Saudi military has overseen the establishment of a security barrier to protect against Islamic insurgency infiltration along the northern border with Iraq. They said the military and border guard command would ban unauthorized visitors or vehicles along the 800-kilometer border. And you can see this is definitely getting prepared for something big to go hot here. And they're getting ready for this, and they're taking all their military assets, they're positioning it in the areas they need, and pretty soon we're going to be seeing these troops funnel into Iraq. Now, out in Libya, we understand the situation is very, very bad for the U.S. government and central bankers. And we understand they've been showing the Islamic State riding around on motorcycles saying, yes, the Islamic State is inside Libya. But it looks like what they're doing now is they're telling everyone that the rebels inside Libya, they're actually joining up with the Islamic State. So we're just going to call them the Islamic State right now. And we can go after them anytime we want. And we can see this is starting to really build up right now. And they have reports coming out that the Islamic State is now in control of a city in Libya that lies a little bit more than 200 miles from Greece. The Islamic State pose a serious threat in Libya. They are well on their way to creating an Islamic emirate in eastern Libya. The Islamic fighters in Derna have been bolstered by scores of local Libyans pledging their allegiance to the terror group and signing up to join its ranks. And of course, we have to remember that General Martin Dempsey said that yes, troops might be entering Iraq and then Libya, then Yemen. This is on the table and we haven't decided yet. Well, let me just tell you, they have already decided. They already know what they're going to do. They will be sending troops into this area. Now, of course, Turkey is out there and they are saying and this is coming from the Turkish President Erdogan. He is saying that he is very frustrated with the U.S. and its allies because they are not responding to the conditions set for his country to play a greater role in the coalition against the militants in Syria. Turkey wants the United States to help train and equip a large contingent of rebel-free Syrian army forces to fight against the regime of President Assad, and also wants to create the creation of a long security zone inside Syria along the Turkish border. Now, of course, the United States government central bankers just can't do all this at once because it would be too obvious that they're going after Assad. So they do this very, very slowly, and of course, the Turkish president wants this to happen very, very quickly. He's saying it's taking way too much time now. Now, there are reports out there saying that the Islamic State has sufficient quantities of arms to carry on fighting for at least 2 years now. And they're saying they have sufficient reserves of small arms, ammunition, and vehicles to wage its war for Syria and Iraq for up to 2 years. The Islamic arsenal includes T-55 and T-72 tanks, U.S.-manufactured Humvees, machine guns, short-range anti-aircraft artillery, including shoulder-mounted rockets, and extensive supplies of ammunition. And we have to understand that all these were being given to them by the United States government central bankers. This was completely planned, and we understand they're going to be there for a very long time because the United States government central bankers have told us that this is not going to be a short battle. It's going to be a long one. Now, we talk about Al-Qaeda, Islamic State quite often, and I just want to go over certain things that you might not know of, and this is coming out of global research. Basically, the U.S. has supported Al-Qaeda and its affiliated organizations for almost a half a century. CIA training camps were set up in Pakistan. Jihadist textbooks were published by the University of Nebraska. The United States spent millions of dollars to supply Afghan school children with textbooks filled with violent images and militant Islamic teachings. Osama bin Laden, America's boogeyman and founder of Al-Qaeda, was recruited by the CIA in 1979 at the very outset of the U.S.-sponsored jihadist war against Afghanistan. He was 22 years old and was trained in CIA-sponsored guerrilla training camps. The Islamic State was originally an Al-Qaeda-affiliated entity created by U.S. intelligence with the support of Britain's MI6, Israel's Mossad, Pakistan's Inter-Service Intelligence, and Saudi Arabia General Intelligence Presidency. The Islamic State brigades were involved in the U.S. NATO-supported insurgency in Syria directed against the government of Assad. NATO and the Turkish High Command were responsible for the recruitment of the Islamic State and al-Nusra mercenaries from the outset of the Syrian insurgency in March 2011. There are Western special forces and Western intelligence operatives within the ranks of the Islamic State. British special forces and MI6 have been involved in training jihadist rebels in Syria. Western military specialists on contract to the Pentagon have trained the terrorists in the use of chemical weapons. The Islamic State practice of beheading is part of the U.S.-sponsored terrorist training program implemented in Saudi Arabia and Qatar. A large number of Islamic State mercenaries are convicted criminals released from Saudi prisons on condition they join the Islamic State. Saudi death row inmates were recruited to join the terror brigades. Israel has supported the Islamic State and al-Nusra brigades out of the Golan Heights. Jihadist fighters have met Israeli IDF officers as well as Prime Minister Netanyahu. The Islamic State are the foot soldiers of the Western Military Alliance. Their unspoken mandate is a wreak havoc and destruction in Syria and Iraq, acting on behalf of their U.S. sponsors. U.S. Senator John McCain has met with the jihadist terrorist leaders in Syria, and there was a picture of him. The Islamic militia, which is currently the alleged target of the U.S. NATO bombing campaign under a counterterrorism mandate, continues to be supported covertly by the U.S. Washington and its allies continue to provide military aid to the Islamic State. U.S. and allied bombings are not targeting the Islamic State. They are bombing the economic infrastructure of Iraq and Syria, including factories and oil refineries. The Islamic State Caliphate project is part of a long-standing U.S. foreign policy agenda to carve up Iraq and Syria into separate territories. The homegrown terrorist threat is a fabrication. It is promoted by Western governments and the media with a view to repealing civil liberties and installing a police state. The terror attacks by alleged jihadists and terror warnings are invariably staged events. They are used to create an atmosphere of fear and intimidation. The ultimate objective is to instill in the minds of millions of Americans that the enemy is real and the U.S. administration will protect the lives of its citizens. The counterterrorism campaign against the Islamic State has contributed to the demonization of Muslims, who in the eyes of Western public opinion are increasingly associated with jihadists. Anybody who dares to question the validity of the global war on terrorism is branded a terrorist and subjected to the anti-terrorism laws. The ultimate objective of the global war on terrorism is to subdue the citizens, totally depoliticalize social life in America, prevent people from thinking and conceptualizing, from analyzing facts and challenging the legitimacy of the social order which rules America. So you can see right now from all of this, this has been set up completely to pretty much convince us that we will eventually need to go to war, give up our rights, and just listen to the government because they will protect us. And we can see right now this is completely fake, phony, and false. Now we understand Qatar has pretty much worked with China to become the Middle East hub of the Chinese yuan. And what we're seeing right now is the United States is out there and they're disclosing that Qatar might finance terror. And we can see this is all part of their playbook. This is what they use over and over and over again. And of course, every time we see a country link up with Russia or China, we see the United States come out and they use the same playbook to say, look, there's a problem in this country and either it's Ebola, either it's terror or something else, and the United States government central bankers need eventually to go into these countries. Now it looks like there's some propaganda coming out about what has been happening with Assad and his chemical weapons. And it seems like there's a senior military official in the Iraqi Ministry of Defense, and he's revealed, and of course he has to remain anonymous, that President Assad made a deal with Maliki in Iraq to smuggle chemical weapons from Syria into Iraq during the time when the UN was in there trying to remove all the chemical weapons because of the deal that was made with Russia, United States, and Assad. And Maliki was hiding these chemical weapons inside of Iraq, and when everything was said and done, the Iraqi government would smuggle the weapons back into Syria. And this is what they're using right now as propaganda to convince us that Assad again has chemical weapons and he's going to use them. And of course, as we know, this is a complete made-up propaganda trick. Maliki right now is not in government power. There are no chemical weapons inside of Iraq from Syria. They were all accounted for, and right now we can see this is a trick that they're trying to use. Just like they said there were hidden chemical weapons in the Alawite section of Syria. They weren't produced and given to the UN forces to dispose of, and all of this is being ginned up right now to figure out a way and how they're going to get Assad, and they're not going to stop doing this. This will continue as time goes on because they need to get into Syria and remove Assad. Now it looks like in England, the City of London police are saying, listen, we are very worried about a cyber attack against the financial institutions. The Commissioner, Adrian Leppard, called on firms to implement protective measures against cyber attacks, and they're saying that these attacks are going to be coming from the Islamic State, and they're very worried about this, that they're going to hit the financial institutions. And we can see that all of these countries are preparing and getting ready for something to happen. And as we know, we realize that this is all propaganda to convince everyone that yes, when this event does occur, it is from the Islamic State, it is from Russia, it is from China, and you can see they are definitely building up for this, and they're making everyone understand that this is where all this is coming. And we understand that this is eventually what is going to happen, because they need to have this event occur to cover up this collapse and to convince everyone that we need to go to war in Syria, in Iraq with Russia and China. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.